Good morning, everyone. Shavua Tov, and welcome to our Parsha class, the Parsha of Bamidbar. We begin with the L'chaim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nihiyah b'dvarei. Okay, we ready? We're ready. The Parsha of Bamidbar is the first Parsha of the new book, the fourth book of the Torah, the book of Bamidbar, or the book of Numbers, which is interesting because the name of the book in Hebrew is very different than the name of the Hebrew. In the Hebrew, the name is Bamidbar, which means in the desert. Why is it called in the desert? Because now we tell us some stories that happened to the Jewish people while they were in the desert. Beginning in this week's Parsha, where we talk about how Hashem counted the Jewish people. We're talking about the beginning of the second year of them being in the desert. So they have celebrated 1 year, Pesach. A lot happened during the first year. They had the giving of the Torah, Mount Sinai. They had the terrible sin of the golden calf. Moshe was on the mountain for a while, comes down on Yom Kippur, and we have the building of the Mishkan that lasts a few months till Rosh Chodesh Nisan. And then we have the inauguration of the Mishkan. We have the various laws that God told them about the Levites and about the service and about the Kohens. And now we begin year two, the second year of the Jewish people in the desert. At this point, they are still in Plan A, that they will go into Israel very soon. It was delayed a bit with this whole issue with the sin of the golden calf and the building of the Mishkan, but now they're still planning to go there, right? And in this book, we speak about what happens during the year. So we have the counting that happens, the first day of the second month, the first day of Iyar. We have them traveling for the very first time. We have the story of the rebellion of Korach. We have the story of the spies, the stories of the well of Miriam, all these stories that happen during the time of the Jewish people in the desert. And eventually, the end of the book ends at the end of the 40 years, right before Moshe passes away. And that leads us into the next book, the book of Deuteronomy, Devarim, the final book, which is basically Moshe's farewell to the Jewish people, speaking to the Jewish people before he passes away. So therefore, it's called Bamidbar. It's what happened to the Jewish people while they were in the desert. In English, we call it the book of Numbers. Simply, why is it called the book of Numbers? Because the beginning of the book is with a lot of numbers. This whole parsha is a census. We count the Jewish people. This amount of people, this amount, right? A lot of numbers are being thrown around, right? We count the Jewish people. The sum total 603,000 and 550, I believe. And then we count the Levites, the next parsha, and then later in the parsha, in the book, in the parsha of Pinchas, again we count. So there's a lot of counting going on in this book. So we call it the book of Numbers. But the truth is that if you look in the Gemara and the Talmud, when the Talmud refers to this book, it also refers to it as the book of Numbers. Where is that? So just this morning, Michael was asking me about the combination of parshas. Some weeks, like last week, 2 parshas are together. So how does that work? So we know that there's a cycle of reading beginning and concluding the entire Torah every year. We start with the first Shabbos after Simchas Torah, and we complete the entire Torah with the Parsha of Zos HaBracha on Simchas Torah. And because we don't read every Shabbos, some Shabbos are holidays, so we read a different Parsha. So we have to make sure that there's enough Parshas for the weeks of the year. So therefore, sometimes we have to combine some of the Parshas. But the truth is, it's more than that. It's also because the Talmud tells us that there are certain Parshas that are supposed to be read at specific weeks of the year. For example, the Parsha of Bamidbar is always read the Shabbos before Shavuos. So this year, Shavuos, the holiday of the giving of the Torah, is Sunday night. Next week, from 1 week from today, at night, Sunday night is Shavuos. So the Shabbos beforehand, this coming Shabbos, we read the Parsha of Bamidbar. So the Talmud tells us that we have to read the Parsha, from the first Parsha of the book of Numbers before Matan Torah. So the Talmud refers to this Parsha and this book as the book of Numbers, of counting. I'm sorry, not numbers, counting. The book of Pekudim, the book of counting, is read before Shavuos, which is interesting, because what exactly is the connection between book of Numbers, the book of the counting, and Shavuos, the giving of the Torah, right? It seems to be that there's a connection over here, that specifically we have to read this parsha, the parsha of the counting, before Shavuos. If it was just the idea of the desert, Bamidbar, the idea of the desert. So one year we spoke about the connection between the desert and the giving of the Torah, because the Torah was given in the desert, and it wasn't just where we were. If we wanted to find the Jewish people, where were they? They were in the desert. We'll go to the desert to give them the Torah. It was specific. It was planned. It was orchestrated that way. God specifically wanted to give us the Torah not in the city, but in the desert, because the desert is ownerless. No one could say, this is my territory, this is my property. We're in the desert. We're all equal. And that's the idea, that the Torah is an inheritance to all the Jewish people. No one could say, I own the Torah more than you. I acquired it. This is mine. Okay, that's one concept, but that's connected to the idea of desert. What is the idea of counting specifically that has to do with the giving of the Torah? So there is this powerful midrash, amazing midrash. The midrash is actually in Deuteronomy. The midrash rabbah in Deuteronomy, and it quotes one of the greatest sages of all time, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Right, we just celebrated his yahrzeit of Lag BaOmer, the Rashbi, as he's known. And he says something amazing. He says, how many Jews were there? We counted 600,000 men between the ages of 20 and 60. You can do the math. Multiple million people. Right? Two or three, maybe 4 million people standing around Mount Sinai receiving the Torah. So the Rashbi tells us, Ilu hoyu Yisroim chasedim afilu adam echad. If the Jewish people were missing, if they were short, even one person, if one Jew wasn't there, loy hoisa hashchina niklas aleihem, the Shechina, the divine presence, would have not revealed itself to the Jewish people at Mount Sinai. And we learn this from the verse where it says that God descended on the mountain in front of the eyes of all the Jewish people, that every single one was needed to be there. And that perhaps is the connection between the book of counting, the story of counting, and the receiving the Torah. So what's counting? When we count, what we are saying is that each and every one counts. Each and every one is important.
Hashem's love for the Jewish people.
Not just for the Jewish people, but for each individual Jewish person. We're counting 1, 2. Each person is a 1. We're not, you're a half. Oh, you are such a special person. We're going to count you as 5. Well, each person equally half shekel, but each person equally, that's the point. Each person is not more or less valuable. Each individual is a world for itself. Every person is a world. Every person has infinite value. That's what counting tells us. Each and every person is equal, and each and every person counts. You skip. Well, skip. You're what are you worth? You're good for nothing. No. Each and every person was counted equally. Each and every person is important. And that perhaps is the connection why we read the book of counting, the story of counting the Jewish people right before Matan Torah. Because when God gave us a Torah, this is what his message to us was. I care for each and every one of you. So let's read a few verses inside. At the beginning of the Parsha, we're on page 848. Book of Numbers, chapter 1, verse 1. God spoke to Moshe. He was in the desert of Sinai, the Sinai desert. And he spoke from the tent of meeting, the Ohel Moed, which is a reference to the Mishkan. What day was this? It was the first day of the second month, Bashana Hashenis of the second year. The Tseisam from them leaving Egypt, Lamer, and this is what he said. Su'u. Su'u can mean count, can mean lift up. Es roish koladas b'nei Yisrael. The heads of the entire congregation of the Jewish people, lemish b'chaisam, to their families, leveis laveisam, to their fathers' families, the mispar shemois kozach l'gugulaisam. They're you keeping account of their names. Every male take a head count. Verse 3, from 20 years old and older, all those who are able to go out in the army, you should count them, and you and Aaron. And with you, when you count them, it should be with you a senior person from each tribe who is the head of the tribe, his father's house. And he lists the names of the various leaders of the tribe. So what do we have over here? We have Moshe and Aaron, together with the leaders of the tribe, are counting all the men from ages 20 to 60. These were the ages that were fit to fight in a war. And some people say that this was actually maybe even preparing for war as they were going into Israel, so we have to count them. And the Torah goes on, the Parsha goes on to counting all the Jewish people. But I want to go back to these words in verse 2. The mispar shemos, counting their names. What does it mean to count their names? Each individual. Rashi says what Michael mentioned previously, that we're talking about over here, that you have to count each person with their name, and it's like a head count. But we don't literally mean a head count, we mean giving the half a shekel. That whenever we counted the Jewish people, in order not to have an evil eye, so they would give a half a shekel, and then they would count the half shekel. They wouldn't count every individual. I saw an interesting interpretation from the Baal HaTurim, another commentary. The Mispar Shemos, we're mentioning the names over here because the Torah is very proud that when the Jewish people were in Egypt, they never changed their Jewish name. We know that there were three things that they kept their identity in Egypt. They didn't change their language, they didn't change their clothing, and they didn't change their names. So they kept the Jewish names, they kept their unique type of clothing, and they kept their Jewish language. I don't know if they had Jewish food at the time. Matzo balls and the gefilte fish and cholent only came around later. Yeah, but these were more, you could say cultural things, but they kept that identity. Interesting. I recently we've been talking about the Spanish Inquisition, right? That the conversos at the time, and a big thing of there was the names. So many of the Jews just changed their names and they adopted the Spanish Christian names, and even in some of the letters of some of the people talking to each other, they refer to the conversion as oh, we changed our name. Change our name was like a code to we converted to Christianity. So the name was a big part of it. So the Jewish people, they kept their names. So God was like emphasizing that. B'mispar shemesh, we're going to count your names. We're so proud of your Jewish names. But then there's Nachmanides. Nachmanides points out something interesting. He says these words that God counted them, their names, and every there's a head count for every person. We don't find this in the previous count when the Jewish people left Egypt and after the golden calf. Over there, we don't mention that, and there's a reason for it. So what he says is that with the other times that God counted the Jewish people, not necessarily did each individual have to come and show up to the census to be counted. A parent was able to come and say, here's 5 half-shekel coins. That's for me, my wife, my 3 kids. And that was okay. We didn't have to have each individual come by. Even if we're not talking about children like under 20, but we're talking about even from 20 to 60, not every person has to come. The head of the family could come and say, this is for my family. X amount of people that say in the family in that tent. Write it down. And that was fine. But over here, Nachmanides says that each individual had to pass by Moshe and Aaron. They had to look at each one and count each person. And why? Because each person counts. There was like this idea that Moshe and Aaron, and obviously God wanted to see and count each individual, because each individual is cherished with his or her infinite value. So everyone came in the line and walking by, and they were counting each person through the shekel, half shekel, but counting each person. Which reminds me of the story of, we know that the Rebbe would give out dollars for charity every Sunday, starting from 1986 or so. And hundreds of thousands, if not thousands of individuals will come by. And it'll take many hours. And the Rebbe wasn't old, wasn't young, he was up in his 80s. And he would stand there giving out charity. He wouldn't sit, he would stand, and he wouldn't allow other people to give it out for him. He would, with his hand, give each of it individual. And a woman came by and asked the Rebbe, says, Rebbe, is this not too tiring for you? You want to sit down, you want to take a break. How do you do this? How do you do this every single week? The Rebbe said that when you count diamonds, you don't get tired. Each person is seen as counting diamonds. And that's the idea. That's really the idea that we have this counting. It's not just about counting. We're counting each individual. It's like giving this boost to each person. God needs you. We're about to give you the Torah. What's the first commandment? Anochi Hashem Elokecha. I am God, your God. What we don't say is Anochi Hashem Elokechem in plural. I am God of all Jewish people, which would have been the natural way to say this, because God was speaking to millions of people. Ani Hashem Elokechem. God says, Ani Hashem Elokecha. I am your individual God. Each and every one of us, God tells us, I want you. I have a relationship with you. You count. You are infinitely valuable and cherished by me. And like Rashbi says, if you were not here, if you slept in, if you didn't make it to class, if you didn't make it to Mount Sinai, the whole thing would have been off. Would have been waiting. Hold it. We still got a few people coming. We're not starting the show because one individual is missing. Really, you're gonna right? How often are we on the plane? Oh, one guy's late. Oh, gotta wait. 300 people are sitting there all upset for one guy. Yeah, okay, we could be upset. But God says we're not starting until each individual is there, because each individual counts. That is that message of Matan Torah. That's the message of Shavuos. And that is the reason why we read this Parsha, the Parsha of counting. Because God tells us, yes, I'm counting you, and I'm counting you, and I'm counting you, because each individual is valuable. Now, this concept is also seen in Jewish law, in halakha. It's a fascinating discussion. And it's a discussion which is relevant to so many different ways. So, give you an example. It's a real story that happened in Israel, a very sad story. I'm sure it happened since then as well, but there was a big halachic discussion in the 1980s, I believe 1985 and 1984, where this was during the first Lebanon War, and the Israelis were in southern Lebanon, and there were many Israeli soldiers in a structure in a building, and the building collapsed. There was an explosion. I think till today it's debated whether it was like a planned bombing, a car bomb, or maybe there was just an incident, something, a mistake. Whatever it was is not so important now. But the point is that this building structure collapsed. And the end of the story was that there were about 90 soldiers who were killed in this incident. Terrible, terrible story. But at the time, as soon as the building collapsed, they wanted to come and rescue, see who they could rescue. So there were multiple stories, and there were soldiers in multiple stories of this building. Now the question was like this: the bottom of the building is where most of the soldiers were, and they were stuck under this rubble, crushed, suffocating. We didn't know what was going on there. And then you had some individual soldiers on the higher levels. Now, when it comes to evacuating and saving people under rubble, there are two ways to do it. Either you do it very, slowly and carefully in order not to cause more things, collapse and more debris and more rubble to fall. So you do it with either very light machinery or even by hand, in order to make sure that we don't kill anyone who's still alive. But that takes a long time. It's very slow. Or we come with the big, large bulldozers, machinery, which could really take large pieces of rubble away, and you kind of get to the bottom. So they had this dilemma, and this was in real time because we're talking about in minutes, right? The dilemma was we have most of the soldiers, many soldiers are in the bottom. And in order to get to them, you got to bring in heavy machinery and just start removing things. Problem is, if you take heavy machinery, you are likely going to kill some of the soldiers who are still alive in the higher stories. But it's only a few. So you have just a handful of soldiers on the top. And you're risking their life to hopefully save many more soldiers on the bottom. So what do? If we work slowly trying to save the ones on the top, likely we're not going to get to the ones on the bottom and more soldiers will die. So the question is, it was a numbers game. What do? Do we say that in order to save the many, we can risk the life of the few? Or do we say we can't deliberately risk the life of the few to save the many? This is a real question. What do? How do we solve this problem? And many rabbis were actually discussing it at the time. What to do? This is actually a question that comes up with when we talk about today's newest technology, where today we have self-driving cars, right? It's right on the street. The other day, my sister in California sent me a picture of a car. He said, this is a self-driving taxi. You get into the car and you put in your app where you're going, and that's it. It drives to your destination. And they have it all over California today. So you have self-driving cars. It's a reality. It's here. It's here. And of course, I'm sure today they use a lot. They rely a lot on AI. But the question is like this: the programmers. Ultimately, you got to program the program. You got to build out the algorithms for every scenario. What will the car do in this scenario? There are millions of scenarios, and many of them maybe will never happen, right? But if it did happen, what will the car do, right? So you have a scenario where the car is driving down the street, and for whatever reason, maybe someone else is in the way, the car is about to head into pedestrians. And now the question is like this: if the car goes straight, you're going to hit and kill, let's say, 10 people. If the car veers off to the other side, there's only one person there. So the car is going to kill one person. And obviously, that's the only two options, right? If whatever. In the scenario where there's no brakes, there's no other place to go. The question is between these two things. Again, it's a 1 in a million, obviously. If you're able to brake, you're able to crash into the wall, or you're able to go into whatever, obviously. But the question is, in this scenario, it's a hypothetical. In this scenario, where it's one of these two options, either we go and hit, we go straight and hit 5 people, 10 people, or we go to the side and hit one person. What should the car do? I mean, the person, you yourself, you have the same question, right? In this if you were behind the wheel, and of course at that moment you just do whatever you're able to do, right? No one thinks about it. But when you're sitting down and you are thinking about it, because you're planning, you're building the program, you're building the self-driving car, and now you have the time to think. It's not in a second moment notice. It's like, okay, let's figure this out. In this hypothetical, what should the car do? We got to build the algorithm for the car. Should we kill the many, or should we kill the individual? We obviously want to save lives, want to kill as less people as possible, but one person is in harm's way, one person isn't. Could you kill the one in order to save the many? I don't know, it's a question. What will you do? What's the answer? And this question comes up many, many times, right? You have going back to at wartime. This was also a question that came up once, where there were people in a bomb shelter, and someone threw in a grenade, and you have 3 seconds or so, whatever, to like quickly pick up the grenade and throw it away somewhere else. So here's the question: you have one area with 10 soldiers, and you have another area with 2 soldiers, and the grenade was thrown to the 10. Now they have the opportunity to quickly move it to the 2. So do you say, listen, we'd rather 2 die than 10 die, so maybe we should quickly move the grenade and kill the 2 and saving the 10? Obviously, if you're able to throw it away and let the terrorists die, that's great. But that's not the option, right? So again, what do we do? Are we allowed to save many people, many individuals, many worlds by taking away the life of a few? It's a question. And the truth is, the Mishnah deals with this. The Torah talks about this scenario where you have a city of Jewish people, and the local authorities, who are, at the time, were known to be bloodthirsty for Jews, Jewish blood, and they come to the city and say, listen, you got 1 or 2 options. Either we kill the entire city, we kill all Jews in the city, which people knew was a viable option, was something that may happen. Or if you want to save the city, we want you to choose one person and send this person out, and we'll kill this one person. We'll kill the one person in order to save the entire city. Okay. Well, one person is only one person, the entire city, right? The Mishnah tells us it is forbidden to send one person out. We can't kill one to save the many. Yes, if that means that the entire city will be killed, we can't kill one in order to save the many. Why? What is the reason for it? What's the reason for it? So some give a very technical reason. The technicality is we don't have the right to kill someone just to save someone else, right? The prohibition of killing is so severe that even if it means saving other people, you're not allowed to kill one to save others. But the Rebbe says it's actually a lot more than that. It's a lot more than that. The Rebbe wrote this interestingly in 1944 during the horrors of the Holocaust. The Rebbe wrote a speech that he gave at a Sheva Brachos here in America. And he spoke about the idea that at a Sheva Brachos, we were talking about a marriage of a young Jewish couple, we say the blessings at the Sheva Brachos and at the chuppah, at the wedding, and we reference Adam and Eve, the first human beings, Adam and Eve. And he says, because Adam and Eve, they were the only ones in the world at the time, right? When they were created, they realized that the entire world is on their shoulders. They have the responsibility to be the ones. You can't say someone else will do it. There's no someone else. It's just Adam and Eve. So each individual, when we get married, when we start our family, when we start building our home, we have to realize it's us. We are Adam and Eve. Ignore the whole world. God needs us to fulfill our mission. So the Rebbe says this is the reason why we don't kill the one in order to save the many. Not because it's a technicality we're not allowed to kill. Because who are we to decide who is more valuable? First of all, we all have a godly spark, which is infinite value. And it's not a numbers game. One of infinite is not any less than two of infinity, right? Once you go into the infinite, it's not there's a billion, and this is 2 billion. Okay, so 2 billion is more than 1 billion. It's not just each person is so valuable, but more people are even more valuable. Each individual is infinitely valuable. So once there's an infinite value to a person because of the godly spark with that person, so one is not less valuable than two. So therefore, we don't have a right to kill two in order to save many. No right to kill one in order to save many. And to take this a step further, we also don't even know what the person will accomplish. Because let's say the story of Joseph, for example, right? Joseph was just one of the brothers. But what happened? Who was from the 12 boys? Who was the one who saved the whole region from famine? It was Joseph. So yes, he's only one, but he was the one that actually saved so many people. So we don't even know what a person will accomplish. We don't even know what will be from that one individual. So the Torah says, no, you're not allowed to decide on, one is less valuable than many, because each individual has that infinite value. And that is what the message of Matan Torah is. And the reason why we read this Parsha specifically, the Parsha of counting. I'm counting each individual because I'm announcing to the world that each individual is a diamond. Each individual is the whole world. Each individual has infinite potential, and each individual, just by being here with the godly spark within him and her, is infinitely valuable. And I care for you, and God needs us. Like Rashbi says, if you weren't there, I couldn't give the Torah. Just think about that. If I wasn't there, God wouldn't give the Torah to the millions of people. So to conclude with the story, which I might have said in the past, of Tostanini, the great Italian composer, who was once listening to an orchestra play one of his songs that he wrote, compositions, and when and it sounded amazing. It was a big orchestra, big crowd, everyone loved it. Wow, amazing, amazing, amazing. And someone asked him afterwards, "No, tell us, how did you like it?" He said, "It was good. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't perfect. It sounded amazing. Yeah, but there was one instrument that was missing. One instrument was missing, and I was able to hear it." He says, "I couldn't hear it." The guy says, "It sounded great." He says, "Yeah, you couldn't hear it, but you're just a listener. I'm the composer, so I know how it was meant to sound. And I noticed that one little instrument that you could barely hear, but they would have added and made it perfect." God is the composer. So God says, I know how it's supposed to sound, and I need each individual to be part of this orchestra. And if one is missing, it's just not complete. It's missing. It's not the same. So as we get ready for Shavuos, just thinking about that God is the God of the entire world, the entire human race. Billions and billions of people have a relationship with God, and He's busy with the big things, with running this big world. But running this big world for God doesn't mean that God isn't concerned and does not have a personal relationship with each and every one of us. And God knows what's going on in our personal lives. And that little issue that we're dealing with, God cares, and God's with us, and God appreciates every little thing that we do, that's a little bit of a push, and says, you know what, I'm going to do this for God. I'm going to do this for Hashem, to do what's right, something a little altruistic that may not be so comfortable, but I'm doing it for Hashem, an extra little mitzvah. That is worth the whole world and important in God's eyes. So that is a little message for today's Parsha. Thank you for joining us. Have a Shavua Tov. And
Thursday.
And I'm just thinking next week. Next week is Sunday, the day before Shavuos. We should be able to do Parsha. So why not? So we should be able to do Parsha class next week on Sunday as well. Hope to see you then.
Thank you, Rabbi Mendel. A great message.
Thank you.